Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching with Rabbi-Cantor Hilary Chorny.
We are entering the third part of the tripartite story of Joseph and his brothers. The story began last Shabbat morning. It began with the story of Joseph being the beloved young child of Jacob, who had many children, and Joseph was his favorite, which we knew partly from the very special ketonet pasim, the big multicolored coat that he was gifted by his father. Joseph is a dreamer. He is a diviner. He has these special dreams that he's not shy about sharing them, and those dreams become a source of friction between especially his brothers and him. His brothers decide they're going to kill him. They wind up throwing him into a pit, and eventually, rather than leaving him in that pit, they sell him into slavery and to some Midianites. He winds up with Potiphar and the family of Potiphar, and he becomes jailed by Potiphar because of something that takes place with Potiphar's wife, where he is falsely accused of misbehavior with the wife, and he is sent down to prison where he meets two important people for whom we see him interpret dreams again. He interprets the dreams accurately. One, who he meets, the baker who he meets, he foresees and foretells that the baker is not going to ever find favor again, and unfortunately this is his end. And for the Sar HaMashkim, the cupbearer, Joseph properly predicts that he is going to eventually be forgiven, released, brought back into Pharaoh's palace and back into working, back into the work for Pharaoh and his people. That Sar HaMashkim promises that he'll tell the Pharaoh of Joseph and his capacity and his ability to divine and interpret dreams, but he doesn't for a while. Last week in the afternoon, I spoke about the problem with not remembering at least right away. But eventually the Sar HaMashkim actually does remember. He remembers that Joseph is a great dream interpreter, and he remembers that when, ultimately, Pharaoh has a set of dreams, which, as Rabbi Shapiro spoke about this Shabbat morning, Joseph sees as one contiguous dream, one big dream, a dream about cows, 7 healthy cows which come and consume 7 skinny little cows, and also a similar dream regarding sheaves in the field that come and consume other sheaves in the field. He says that this is a prediction, that this is a foretelling of terrible years of famine that are ahead. And since Joseph is able to properly interpret the dreams, not only is he brought up from the prison cell that he is in, but he's brought up to be a right-hand man of Pharaoh. This is the story to date. Did I miss any important parts in there so far? Eventually, things get bad in Canaan, and the brothers, these same brothers who did what to Joseph? They were going to kill him. They're going to throw him in a pit. They eventually sell him into slavery. These brothers who treated him so terribly wind up at the gates of Pharaoh. They wind up at the palace asking for help because they don't have provisions. They need help. And who should they meet when they come to the palace?
Joseph.
Their estranged brother, Joseph. Joseph knows that the brothers are who they are. Did they know who Joseph is? No, they have no idea who Joseph is. And Joseph's first instinct is to be vengeful. What does he do out of spite? We're not going to study that part of the story today. What does he do out of spite? We studied, that was this morning. It's written as a calypso in the Andrew Lloyd Webber version of the story. No, that wasn't a good enough hint. I thought that was pretty good. It was a calypso. He gets sneaky and he puts something in the bag. He puts a cup into Benjamin's bag. And what's interesting about that spiteful choice, what's interesting about the choice that he makes is not only is he being vengeful, but you can see that Joseph is copying from the playbook of the other people who have been in power who he's encountered. And I think that's an interesting thing that sometimes happens, is that we see people in power using their power to do not so great, credible, nice things. And then when we're finally in a position of power, we try some of those things on for size, maybe consciously, maybe subconsciously. But remember, how did Joseph wind up in prison in the first place? How did he get into the prison? How did he get there? To the prison. I think I heard it over here. He was falsely accused of misbehavior, of misconduct with Potiphar's wife by her. And what does he do? He falsely accuses Benjamin. So he's taking from the playbook of what he's seen in his life, and he's being a real so-and-so. Like, he's got the power to do this, and he's pulling off more than a prank. He's really pulling about as serious a move as one can pull, because he knows what the actual outcome of pulling such a move would be, which is that he would go to prison. He knows this because he went to prison. And this is terrible. The idea that somebody would be accused of stealing from somebody in high authority in Pharaoh's palace, or whatever we call the great home that Pharaoh had built. Finally, Joseph can't keep the whole gambit going anymore. He can't hold back from what he needs to do. My bar mitzvah boy for next week, Noam Sagian, has a wonderful piece of Torah and an interpretation of that. He says that he thinks that in that moment, the reason why Joseph finally feels he has to reveal himself is that ultimately Joseph understands that he has responsibility for the welfare and the well-being of his family. And given the same choice that his brothers faced, he does want to take care of his brothers. But how to handle that moment is a source of great confusion and consternation for Joseph. Because it's not just that he's waited some time. Sometimes I think about Mrs. Doubtfire, which was a movie and then a Broadway show. I'll give you the quick plot in case you haven't seen it or haven't seen it in 28 years, since it was last in theaters, I'm guessing. But basically, there's a custody agreement that goes poorly, and the father in the family, who no longer has custody, goes poorly for him. He determines that the best way to get close to his children is to dress up as a female nanny, an elderly woman, put on an accent and heavy prosthetics. And because it's played by Robin Williams, really brilliantly, of blessed memory, he pulls off this whole elaborate ruse that he is this female nanny. And the whole movie, once he's become this nanny, we all know as the audience that at some point, right, the whole thing is going to have to break. And the real question is, will he reveal himself? Will he come out and say, it's actually me after all this time? Or will he be found out? And I won't, in case you haven't seen the movie, you should go watch it. I won't spoil it. It's the kind of movie where I feel like I should say go rent it at Blockbuster, because I think that was the era it came out in. But you can probably find it on Paramount or something. So go find the movie. It's very good. But Joseph, by comparison, I always think about that as such a great example of somebody who puts themselves in a position of such an elaborate ruse. It's not just that Joseph says, oh, I've now met these boys again, these men, again, my older brothers. I've now met them again. Now I've got to figure out when to reveal myself. He's been messing with them. It's now been at least several days. I'm not sure what span of time we think has actually taken place at this point, but it's not the same moment in which he's met them. He's now falsely accused, told them they have to go back home and get his father, but yet they have to leave the young boy with him. The brothers say, absolutely not. We can't leave the boy here. Our father has already lost a son. That's really the breaking point. And finally, Joseph decides to reveal himself. Now we're at the text that we'll study today. So Joseph is at this breaking point. It's the first first verse of chapter 45. V'lo yachol Yosef lehitapek. Joseph could not control himself, lechol hanitzavim alav, before all of the people who were standing before him. Presumably all of his attendants, but also who else was before him? The brothers. Hotziu chol ish me'alai, he says, take every single person out from before me. Velo amad ish ito, and so no one was any longer standing in front of him. Behit vada Yosef el echav, in his revealing himself to his brothers. So the attendants understood that he wants to reveal himself to his brothers in semi-privacy. When I say semi-privacy, what I mean is the brothers are going to be present for the revelation. That seems obvious, but what I'm saying is he doesn't say leave me alone entirely. He says everyone else get out of here, but he says take everyone out from in front of me. And then eventually, presumably the brothers, I guess maybe they're waiting in an antechamber. They come in and they come to speak with him. Okay. We're going to read a midrash that talks about some of the troubles with this particular verse. This comes from a collection called Midrash Tanchuma. Often we encounter Midrash Tanchuma because it is a favorite ancient collection of Rashi's. Many times we're reading Rashi, the 11th to 13th century French commentator, and we wind up reading a Tanchuma in the midst of Rashi. This is just straight from Tanchuma, from the source itself. A couple of the sources got duplicated in my packet. I apologize, but you can read this as source number 2 or 3. It's in there twice. Reb Shmuel, who is the son of Nachman, said the following: Then Joseph had placed himself in an extremely precarious position, for if his brothers had killed him, not a single person would have been aware of it. Well, what's the Midrash getting at? What's the problem at play? Joseph tells everyone to leave. What's the problem with everyone leaving besides his brothers, according to the Midrash?
They would take revenge on him, and then nobody would be around to...
They might take revenge on him, and nobody would be around to witness, right? And why would we be worried that the brothers would do that? As payback for the way he treated them is one great answer, meaning he just played this elaborate... I don't know, I need a better word than prank or ruse, but it was a really terrible trick that he played on them. They might be very angry, but why, he's still the one in the position of power. Why would we be worried about the brothers doing something like killing him? As AJ points out, they did try to do that before. We know these brothers. And before we talk about the changes in characters, all we've got are these brothers standing before him. We don't know what kind of people they have or haven't become because we haven't re-encountered them except that they're desperate. And desperation doesn't tend to necessarily make people's characters more slowed down or refined. Desperation might make them lash out. So then Joseph was a smart enough cookie and should have felt at least a little concerned by them. So the Midrash is saying he must have had a very good reason for sending the other people out. Joseph said to himself, says the Midrash, I would rather die than shame my brothers before the Egyptians. Somebody unpack that for me for a minute. I would rather die than shame my brothers before the Egyptians. What could he be shaming them for? Marshall, will you pass the microphone to AJ, please? Thank you.
So, drawing from other portions of the text, I think that's picking it up. Other portions of the text refer to Joseph becoming assimilated. There's two threads to pull on here, and I'm going to pull on that one first, and that is, what will the Egyptians think about him, about people from Canaan in general? Right? And so if all of this story comes out, First of all, it's going to be very clear that Joseph was not always a very powerful man, right? And his servants don't know that, right? Pharaoh puts him in charge and dresses him and gives him all the accoutrements of power. And at the same time, the story of what he thinks they did to him, at least, or what he experienced, not necessarily all of their motivations. Not all of them were on the same page, but that has an impact. And in fact, throughout this story, it's never really clear that Joseph was true to the tradition. He really, to me, it's pretty clear that he became very assimilated.
Okay, so why does he not want to embarrass his brothers because of that?
So that thread of it becomes a reflection on a whole people. That's one thing.
Oh, I see. So it might be an embarrassment that here he is, this Israelite who appears as a pharaoh, appears as an Egyptian, a fancy Egyptian. That's very interesting.
They didn't know where are these people ever going to have met Israelites before? Right. So this is their experience of that also.
Fascinating. Okay.
And so that's one way of looking at it. The other way would be simply that he has matured. Mm-hmm. That where's the ruse going? Why did he play this ruse to begin with? We don't know whether he always intended to open up about it, or whether he kind of changed his mind in the middle and he's maturing right in front of us as the story moves forward.
Great. So, I agree with you on that point in particular, that the text seems to give us a little bit of a camera angle in to Joseph's maturing process. His first instinct is to be deceitful, a bit unkind, maybe even deliberately cruel to them, to sort of play around with them, mess around with them because he can, because he's in a position of authority, but he can't sustain it because he realizes inside that something is going on. Reading it through the lens of the Midrash, that's a very different kind of humiliation. I'm fascinated by your other point, but because the Midrash goes a little bit more to the second point, I'll go down that path for a minute. Joseph says he doesn't want to shame his brothers if he's maturing a bit, or matured a bit, and he knows how to handle the situation better than he handled it in the past, then perhaps he doesn't want to embarrass his brothers by revealing himself and therefore putting themselves in a situation where, unprepared and unbeknownst to them, they are now directly facing the person whom they thought they had either sold off or killed. They practically committed fratricide. They're now facing him immediately. They have no preparation for this. If he stands in front of them and tells them, reveals himself to them, they are now standing face to face, not accused, knowing what they did and knowing that he's standing in front of them with no preparation. And he realizes what a horrifying experience this could be. I want you, don't go any traumatic places for me, but I want you to think about one of those things that sort of comes up again and again in your nightmares about something that you wish you'd done differently when you were very young. And imagine what it would be like for somebody against whom you perpetrated this thing. Maybe you grabbed something out of a car or a house or something along those lines. Maybe you pulled off something behind somebody else's back and no one ever found out about it and you were never called to task about it. And imagine if all of a sudden you're standing at a high school or college reunion and you find that you're standing face to face with this person who you did this thing to, and they know full well that you know that they know that you did this to them. It's a terrible, terrible thing. He knows it's going to be stomach dropping for them, and he doesn't want to humiliate them. And the Midrash thinks that the text tells us this rather explicitly. The Midrash continues, when Joseph saw that they were extremely embarrassed, he said to them, "Come near to me, I pray you." This is that next verse. I put it like the second to last page of the packet. I put the verse in there for us. Ve'ata, he says a few verses later, Al te'atzvu, V'al yichar be'einechem, ki mechartem oti hena, ki limchia shalachani Elokim lifnechem. Don't be distressed or reproach yourself because you sold me as you did. V'al yichar be'einechem, the Midrash says, when he saw them and saw that they were very embarrassed, he said to them, "Come near to me." And then the Midrash imagines as each one of them individually approached, he kissed each brother and wept with each brother one by one, because the text in verse 15 says that he kissed all his brothers and he wept on them. And the text imagines that this was a series of intimate, this is the Midrash now imagining that it's not that he fell upon them in a group, but that he had intimate, individual, kissing, weeping moments with every single brother, a moment of healing, reconciliation, letting them be, letting himself feel the feelings, all in that moment. And then we get a verse from Jeremiah teaching us that Joseph's job in that moment was to be a comforter. Just as God is a menachem, God comforts. And the book of Jeremiah is much about that. It is a book of consolation. We learn the following from the Midrash: just as Joseph comforted his brothers while they were weeping, so the Holy One, blessed be God, will redeem Israel while she weeps, as it is said. And then we get the verse from Jeremiah. So the Midrash imagines that facing the brothers who sold him into slavery, who nearly killed him, that rather than any other decision he could have made, what does Joseph do? He sends out anyone else who could have witnessed this scene and lets this be as private as possible, even within that creating moments of individual privacy, whispering, you can imagine, right against the neck of the brother whom he's hugging. And the Midrash imagines in this moment that he is comforting them. What could he have said to comfort them? Well, the text goes on to tell us, right? That's what that verse 4 is telling us, that it was a matter of comfort. He says, I don't want you to still be concerned with the matter that you sold me, because it was all for a reason. It was all for a reason. Now, whether Joseph truly believed that, which the text seems to say Joseph truly believed, and whether we truly believe that it is a fair and helpful thing to look at people who face such circumstances as Joseph, brothers who treated him like he did, and see it with hindsight as if it was all a part of God's plan, whether you believe or feel comfortable believing that, you can still see the power in Joseph's choice of being a menachem in that moment, of being a comforter. He was, first and foremost, a brother and a person in position of privileged power who wanted to be sure that he used all of the authority and the privilege he had in that moment. Meaning, just as they could have killed him, he had the backing of all of Egypt behind him. He could have done something to them just as easily. He was about to, with that whole Cup and Benjamin situation. Didn't choose to do anything like that. Instead, he chose to be kind, to make sure that humiliation was in no way possible for his brothers, and to ensure that he had a private moment to comfort each of them. Rabbi Shai held it's the second piece of paper in the packet, halfway down the page, says the following: Joseph, like Tamar, just a few chapters earlier, would rather die than humiliate another person. Those whose feelings he wants to protect have hurt him immensely and caused him great pain and suffering. Perhaps in learning from these biblical models, we are meant to reason as follows: if Tamar and Joseph, each nursing such deep wounds, nevertheless refuse to humiliate those who have aggrieved them, even at the price of their own lives, how much more so must we subdue the impulse to shame and humiliate? It's the fever dream of a person who was treated as horrifically as Joseph was in his childhood, that he could face the perpetrators of those deeds against him and get right back at them. That is the natural human instinct. What Rabbi Shai Held is saying is that Tamar and Joseph, each in their own stories, we don't have time to, unfortunately, to unpack the Tamar piece. That is interesting on its own. But let's just say Joseph, he serves as a model of somebody who makes a choice that goes against instinct. The reason why this is so important is that we actually get to witness Joseph's instinct at work, and then whether we'll call it, as AJ said, maturation, or maybe his Yetzer Hatov, his good instinct taking over in that moment, he moves from the instinct of, oh, I'm going to get them now, to let's make sure that in the moment where they realize this is me, that we protect them entirely from humiliation. One last thought. One very last thought. This is the Rashi on that verse 4, from 45:4. Bless you. The Rashi is limchia. In the verse itself, that we learn from Joseph, ki lemichia shilachani Elokim lifnechem. It was for, you see chaya or lichiot in that particular verb, for life or for the sake of living, limchia, for the preservation of life, lichiot lachem lamichia, to be for you a lifesaver, one who preserves life. The plain read of that verse, Rashi's read is not a peshat or plain contextual read of the verse. The plain read of the verse is, don't worry, this was all a part of God's plan. I'm not mad at you because look at me. Look at the position I'm in. I'm doing great. I'm fine. I'm covered in gold. I've got all the power in the world. You guys are facing a famine out there. We're warm and comfy and well-fed in here. I'm doing wonderful. That's the plain meaning of the verse in its place. But Rashi says, in the context of the comfort, and you better believe he was reading the same Midrash Tanchuma that we were reading. Rashi says, no. When he says that, the brothers understand, don't worry, because all of this was for a reason. It was so that when the famine hit, I, your brother Joseph, would be in a position of power to help you get out of the famine. That is a step beyond protecting his brother from humiliation that goes even further. He is giving them theological comfort, and he's giving them a reason to sleep at night. He is not relieving them of the burden of what they did to him. And he did get a little bit of revenge. He spooked them. So for sure, he got a little bit of maybe what he had desired. But in the end, what he did was not only protect them from humiliation, but gift them with a firm belief. He, the one who could predict, because God blessed him with predictive power, said, don't worry. This wasn't just for me. This is for all of us. This is for our family. And it's with that in mind and that in hand that they travel back to give Jacob a heart attack because his son is still alive. What a model of decency. What a choice. We are all faced regularly with the opportunity to reassure people that the mistake that they made is not a mistake that ought to haunt them forever. But I highly encourage you to think about, in the moments where you can drum it up and where somebody deserves any degree of relief from humiliation, giving them an opportunity to understand that the story is written, and ultimately, we're all okay and going to be okay, particularly if it's something that's long ago and in the past. It's a really beautiful model.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.